Oilmen, from survivors of famine to victims of nuclear testing. This is a book about Kazakhstan, the people who live there, and the stories that they have so generously shared with me over the years. It was the study of the Russian language that took me to the USSR in the first place in the late 1980s. I started learning Russian in 1984 when the Soviet Union was in the grip of a period of decline known as the Era of Stagnation, ruled by the last in a succession of doddering leaders who presided over that dispiriting age, Konstantin Chernenko, whose death in 1985 ushered in a time of dramatic transformation that ultimately led to the collapse of the USSR. I chose to study Russian more by accident than design, because I liked languages and it was offered at my local sixth form college as a course from scratch to A-level in 2 years. But I had no particular yearning to visit the stagnating USSR, and the idea that this choice would later lead me to spend half my life in the former Soviet Union and take me to live in Kazakhstan in the 21st century would have seemed preposterous. To all of us, then, the USSR seemed like a colossus that would last forever. The Cold War between the West and the evil empire, in the demonizing epithet coined by Ronald Reagan, was in full swing. But around the time I started learning Russian, the Soviet Union began to feature on British TV screens as a place where people just like ourselves lived. I was entranced by Comrades, a series of BBC fly-on-the-wall documentaries that went behind the Iron Curtain to look at how ordinary Soviets lived, from a school teacher to an underground jazz musician, and revealed that there was far more to the USSR than communists, dissidents, and food queues. In 1985, Chernenko died, and the reformer, Mikhail Gorbachev, came to power and set in motion some drastic policy changes that unintentionally paved the way for the fall of the Soviet Union. Glasnost, openness to political debate, and perestroika, restructuring of the creaking economy, which unleashed a new wave of Western interest in the USSR. Exciting things seemed to be happening there, and after I finished my A-levels, I chose a degree course, Modern Languages, at the University of Leeds, specializing in Russian and French, that would take me behind the Iron Curtain to see the evil empire with my own eyes. My first visit to the USSR was in 1988 to attend a Russian language summer school in Minsk. The town was no beauty. Raised in World War II, it had been rebuilt as a Soviet city par excellence, a monument to socialist realism that, to my eyes, seeing the Soviet Union for the first time, appeared drab and soulless as much as monumental and impressive. Yet coming into contact with Soviet people for the first time was exciting. And in spring 1989, I returned to the USSR for 3 months to study Russian at the university in Kiev, nowadays Kyiv, the capital of Soviet Ukraine, which had hit the headlines 3 years earlier when the Chernobyl nuclear power station had exploded nearby. Kiev was a city of golden cupolas, offsetting the grey Soviet tower blocks and beaches lining the Dnieper River, where we swam and sunbathed, heedless of the dangers from radiation exposure. In Gidra Park, Hydra Park, where we used to go for swimming and kebabs, loudspeakers were broadcasting the proceedings of the Congress of People's Deputies, a new Soviet parliament just created by Gorbachev. I paid little heed to the droning of the long speeches crackling through the loudspeakers, but had I listened harder, I would have heard the Kazakh poet Mukhtar Shakhanov, whom I interviewed in Kazakhstan 27 years